Something I have thought about. We all know the conditions that animals live in, and I mean, in terms of like mass farming, just how they're treated and what they're living in, and I mean that whole process. It's not like they're living out on pastures and, living a good life before we slaughter them. And I'm
Right.
just
Mhm.
wondering, I think about this a lot, just what that's doing to us, because if they're in angst and fear and turmoil before they die, and then we're consuming that. I mean, we've got to be consuming that energy in some way, shape, or form, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. This stuff really does change everything in the way you look at everything. I mean, that's the thing about this. Once I started, diving into this, it was just like there's no going back, because it really is opening Pandora's box, and you just look at everything completely differently, down to what you're eating, thinking, doing. I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
Grow your own
It really
food,
is.
I've
Yes.
built a greenhouse and
Yes.
we eat a lot from food from it and yeah, organic, go to growers markets that are
Yes.
nearby and get fresh organic. It's the life force in the
Yeah.
food that is rejuvenating and getting some sun, something I need to do more. This transition we're going through from, the deep state being in control to being slowly dismantled. And, here in the United States, what we have with the situation that's been created, the deep state's not going to go without a fight, but it's because
Right.
it's losing,
Yeah.
it's slowly, we have essentially already won, but it's they still have certain degree of power. So this is an exciting time to be alive right now because we're going to experience this transition from the dark to the light. And like Commander Haben said, the dark will fall and the light will rise, and the true leaders all over the world will rise, and it'll be a beautiful thing. But
Yes.
we
Yeah.
got to go through
Yeah.
the transition.
Yeah. It will be hard going through it, but we'll get through it. And yeah, it'll be worth it.
As I get more information, I'll keep refining this, to get more information. But this will give you a good idea. This is interesting. I had this interaction with this being, a very loving being, incredible love coming from its eyes, projected a sphere in space and relationship of geometry and consciousness, which put a burning passion in me. Um, I found out from Elena that the being was an emether, and that he actually, according to Jenhan, that this being initiated this contact with me. He was following me, my development, that is, and that he gave me the science of the universe and prepared me for in the future that I'll be able to pass knowledge on to the Terrans or the people of Earth. So, in
So
1977, I had no idea of platonic solids and everything.
when you first, in 1977, when you first, you saw him, is that what you're saying?
Um, what happened was, I was dating this lady who owned a metaphysical bookstore in San Diego, and she wanted to do a past life regression on me. And so, okay, and everything went different. It didn't happen the way it was planned. It went through the normal procedure, and all of a sudden, with my eyes closed, all of a sudden I had this, I could see lucidly this being, and I had millions of volts going through my hands and my feet. This Kundalini opening as though it was intense, to put it mildly,
Wow.
but incredibly loving at the same time. And she was very psychic. She said this being is here to share something that I'm going to be doing in this lifetime. And so as I observed the sphere,
There we
there we
go.
go. What the being was conveying is that as we evolve, our density frequency changes from one geometry to the next, and how we evolve is through love. and
Mm.
that as we move from one density to the next, love kind of bridges us to the next higher density, and that all of us are like connected in this matrix. Anyway, it was quite a download. I didn't even know what platonic solids were or sacred geometry at the time, and put a burning passion in me to try to find everything I could. And then as I, started to find out, oh my God, look at that. It's like one to the other. It's like, and then over the years, I started to see there's a lot of scientific validation. I thought it was like some type of metaphor, he was teaching, but it actually had science in it. And as I learned from Genhan, it's exactly the structure of the matrix. And
Mm.
in 2001, I met with a bunch of scientists in San Francisco. Dr. Greer put together, and they were all telling their horror stories about their energy devices and how SWAT teams had come in. One scientist, physicist Mark Cummings, he had a crystal that was generating way more power, and a SWAT team came in, cleaned out his laboratory.
Mm.
Just incredible stories. This is when I was first getting involved in the whole energy thing. And one of the scientists, his name was Nassim Haramein, and I didn't know anything about him. And he was showing me on his laptop an energy device that used just geometry that was bringing in energy from the ethers to powering this light bulb. And it kind of, I never shared the story with him, with anyone, with what happened in 1977. It was like, too out there.
Right.
And I shared with him the story, and he said, "Yes, that's it. That's the structure of the matrix." You know,
Wow.
Then I find out later that's, totally what he's into is studying that geometry.
Wow.
So, this was in the early 1980s. Dr. Marcel Vogel was still working with IBM. He was their head scientist. He he developed the liquid crystal displays that you see on your screen, and the red and blue phosphors for color television, the magnetic coating for hard drives. Back in the 80s, that was like a major thing. He had like 140 patents. Brilliant genius mind. Um, so how he got involved in all this was kind of crazy. It's like he he had to give a course of creativity for the engineers at IBM, which are all, very left brain, you can imagine. And so he saw this article about Cleve Baxter and plant communication, and that you hook up a chart recorder and it responds to human emotions and things. And so he initially thought it was garbage and threw it in the trash. And then he thought, no, this is be good for all the engineers to do. So he set it up, split leaf philodendron, and he burned a leaf, and the chart went like that on a Wheatstone bridge. And then the moment the thought formed in his head to do it again, the chart went like that. And so he said that squiggle changed his life. He was the type of mind that would be relentless to find an answer to something. And so he studied pranayama yoga and did a lot of plant communication. It was written up in the book Secret Life of Plants. He was able from Czechoslovakia to his laboratory in San Jose, California, uh, tune into the plant and cause it to squiggle. Show it's like distance doesn't matter. It's like,
Yes.
quantum entangled. And
Wow.
so he was doing a lecture, and the lady gave him a crystal and said, "I've been told to give this to you." And so he thought this was just woo-woo stuff, right? So yeah, he was studying, using the breath, like pranayama yoga with like the Kundalini fire breath, where you go like that when he focused into the plant. So he was doing a lot of breath work, you could say. And
Wow.
so his colleague at IBM had a back problem, and he took the crystal and he pulsed his breath, and his back problem went away with his intention to do that. And so he was thinking, oh my God, I've got to make this into a more of a tool for consciousness. And so he always used to say to me, the sciences that we're working with are akin to those that we know in normal physics.
Mm.
You have a laser, for example, you have a ruby crystal between two mirrors. One is partially reflective, the other one's perfectly reflective. And they excite the ruby crystal in the middle, and then the oscillation of the light wave is in phase in such a way that it builds with each subsequent oscillation, so that the 1% that is transparent, I guess you could say, is strong enough to cut through steel, power of a
Wow.
laser, this power of lasing. So he thought the same concept of cutting a crystal, and he received in a dream. He saw like the tree of life of the Kabbalah, to cut it into a dipyramidal form. And so I drove all the way to the mines in Arkansas and got him a huge batch of crystals that I delivered to him in San Jose, and he was cutting these for doctors. You can see here he's holding a bunch of blanks that are needing polishing. He started out with a four-sided crystal, and he was teaching 2 dozen medical doctors in the San Francisco Bay Area using his techniques that he was developing. And, he started cutting with four sides, six, eight, and so forth. The increase in sides, he believed you have more reflective spin going on, so it changes the vortex spin the more sides you have. He actually said up to about 14 sides, the vortex spin diminishes. I know people have 36, 144 siding crystals, but Jenhan was more generous. He said up to 24 sides, the vortex starts to diminish. But there's something incredibly magical and significant that Marcel would have loved to have known that I learned decades later, and that is when you cut the crystal, not only cutting it in alignment with the growth axis, the vertical axis, but cutting it in harmony with the natural hexagonal core of the crystal. And if you form your terminations in a certain way, it creates a very special effect in the crystal. And Marcel was very successful in using his techniques. I shared his techniques with Jenhan, and he said, he was very impressed and said these are very effective techniques. And
Wow.
but Marcel didn't know that he was bridging his own consciousness through source through the crystal.
Mm.
Um, and we were studying ancient quartz crystal artifacts. One was the Mitchell Hedges skull, which was an incredible piece of, I mean, it's hard to cut this quartz crystal without fracturing it. And they were
Mm.
actually cutting against the grain. So this beautiful piece was created. He went in with his mind and asked, what is the function of this? And, he was very psychic, and he saw a temple with a hole in the ceiling, and the crystal sat on a pedestal. And when the sun came and a beam came down and illuminated the skull, the old master would come in, and the priest would come and put his left hand on the master and his right hand on the crystal, and he would draw in his breath and pulse his breath, and then the information that was in the old master would be transferred into the crystal skull. And then a young girl came in, a new initiate, you could say, and he reversed his hands, the left hand, you're receiving, and the right hand onto her head, and pulsed his breath, and information was transferred
Wow.
into the young girl. So he saw it as like an information transfer device.
Wow.
And we find out later that quartz crystals can embed consciousness. Um, and then I knew Dr. Ray Brown, who was treasure diving in the waters off the Bahamas. And after a storm, sand moved away a pyramid, and he swam in into a room where it was illuminated from an unknown source. My brother stayed with him for 2 weeks, and nobody knew about all the details of that room. And my brother took very detailed notes, which I shared with Elena. And Elena, from those detailed notes, recreated this room based on those notes, showing a falcon on the wall with its talons holding the sun, and seven figures on each wing, and a golden rod coming from the ceiling with a red crystal pointing out the crystal. This is a photograph I took of the sphere before it was supposedly destroyed.
Wow.
Um, and you can see there's like a grid network that
Yes.
um, what Elena from her past life believes that this was a high council meeting room of the Apakalu, which was Enki's elite scientists. I asked Jenhan about this, and he said that the beings with their minds would create compression waves, which would interact with the crystal sphere, and it would be a communicator to home. Elena believes the red crystal was a form of mercury ore type of crystal that created a holographic projection. So this is Altean technology, which is much more advanced than the Palladian technology, and that's what John Han shared with me.
Um,
And this is a project I worked on. We imported this from England. Hell of a time trying to get through customs.
I'm
Uh,
sure.
is a holographic camera that could tune through time. It was patented by the European Patent Office in 1955 in Paris, France. Thousands of photos were taken with it. My job was what it would do is you would take a drop of blood, and these sound oscillators with these brass radionic dials would vibrate the cavities, and the oscillations would create a holographic projection in space, which would be reflected upon this photographic plate, which would capture a slice of this 3D, like a 2D projection, I guess you'd say, of the 3D projection that's in space. And my job was to, since I had an extensive electronics engineering background and radionics background, I built a number of radionic instruments and understood the principles, that I was to create a real-time display rather than having to deal with, the photographic developing process all the time. This is a time spiral that would move forwards and backwards in the time. This is a woman that is 50 miles away who is pregnant, and you could tune through the holographic field of time from 1 month, 2 months, 3 and 6 months into the future development of the fetus within the mother, showing
Wow.
that the holographic field of time is tunable. And here you can see a homeopathic pill. You can see actually the emanation of the flower of the remedy of the homeopathic pill being emanated and captured. And then taking a seed, just a seed of a lily flower, tuning through its holographic field of time. You could see the bulb cycle, and then you could see in the future the flowering cycle of the seed. So everything in nature has this holographic vector of time that's tunable. So this was thousands of photos were made. It was patented. It did work. So, this is not something that is science fiction. This is
Wow.
actual showing the science does work. Um, the technology was, of course, primitive compared to the extraterrestrial technology. But it proved, nevertheless, that the holographic field can be tuned through time. Now, Andromeda's told Alex Collier that the holographic medbed is like, call it a camera, actually, that when it takes a picture of you, it contains from the moment of your conception to your current state. And then they tune through the holographic field of time and find when your body was optimal, and then they overlay that on the body, and the body morphs into that new pattern. Jenhan confirmed that, and he described how the med beds work. He said Quote, some medbed technologies use fractal holographic technology. Let me explain. The fractal core formula of the tissue to repair is recorded, and the perfect unaltered geometrical pattern is reconstructed and superimposed on the damaged pattern. The old pattern instinctively pairs and morphs into the new one because the universe tends to perfection. That's the key point. It's a holographic fractal repairing. Sound frequency is used to tie in the new pattern to the old one. You remember how I explained earlier that the holographic structures are constructed or altered by frequency. Yeah, Tesla used to say, you want to find the secrets of the universe?
Yes.
Now, this is such good news. Elena, she went physically, and it's not channeled stuff. She went on board a Metaton ship and looked at a time-looking device, the 20 years in the future. Commander Haben said to her, all these technologies that you saw existing 20 years from now are being produced now in this precise moment. Everything is real. Everything exists already. It's ready for when the people of Terra are ready. And a new leader will come. Yay! And
Huh.
the dark will vanish because the light will rise and all the real leaders will rise all over the planet. On the planet Earth, as you call it. And is now very soon the time when you stand up and take the hand we held to you. You finally take it. We are family. And this was in December of 2022 that she had that experience. Is all these, they can see into the future what's going to happen. It was a beautiful world 20 years from now. So I don't know what's going to happen between now and then, but the end result is going to be very good.
Mm.
And
Um,
then Elena actually went to the moon with Dorhan physically on March of 2023. And there's these massive medbed factories that are inside the moon, thousands of these medbeds that are ready to be released to the people of Earth when once we clean house, so to speak. And it will completely transform our current system of medical science completely.
wow.
And so in the future, I was learning a lot more about crystals from another scientist from another world that, and I kept on, once you start researching this stuff, it's like you open a Pandora's box. You can't stop. Once you start to get a little bit, you want to know more. And so I just kept on ever since that article to present day, try to find more corroborating evidence to get a larger picture. There started to become, like I mentioned earlier, a growing number of witnesses coming out that claim to have total memory recall, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie Total Recall,
Yes.
of their service within the secret space program, where they enlist somebody at they're 17, they have to give their consent, and then they're put on into a parallel timeline, and they serve 20 years in space. At the end of their 20-year enlistment, they are then age regressed back to when they were 17 and time regressed back to that point of enlistment, within just a few minutes. And their memories erased as though nothing ever happened.
Mm.
And so you have many of these individuals who I know personally. Um, John Charles was actually the first one, as he came out with his tape, that he did a French radio broadcast back when he was 27 years old or 23, I can't remember, but he had it recorded. It was a French radio broadcast on a major station that he talked about the secret space program. But most people know about Michael Rolfe being one of the first one in the year 2000. My friend Naira Isley, who got into the dark side of abuse on just like my friend Tony Rodriguez, who got into the Nachtwaffen as a slave and working with the Dark Fleet. Andy Bisagio with teleportation as a child. Randy Kramer was part of a Mars Defense Force, where he's used medbed numerous times, after being dismembered and whatever. Uh, William Tompkins wasn't a 20 and back, but he had lots of documented evidence. He was an information disseminator that um, back in the 40s, the U.S. Navy had 29 Navy spies embedded in the Nazi Germany, and they were getting information about the reptilians and the technology, and he was delivering it using the admiral's plane, Admiral Riccobotta, which my father worked under, um, to these different universities, McDonnell Douglas, and so forth. You have Michael Gerloff, who U.S. Marine Corps Special Section, just like Randy Kramer, uh, U.S. Air Force, Emery Smith, Jason Rice, and there's many more, and JP, who has much evidence, photographic evidence of the craft that he's been taking for. So you have all these people, and many more, that are all coming out. And so, of course, in the mix, there's going to be, in order, how do you it's like something that you can't really bring back evidence with the secret space program,
Hmm.
so it's ripe for infiltrating and hijacking and muddying the waters with, a lot of truth, but they mix in the lie and, they say a whole lot of true things. And oh, by the way, the Earth is flat,
Right.
so that
Throw it all off.
it discredits through
Yeah.
association.
Mm.
No, so they want to keep it quiet, and this is how they do it with counter-disclosure assets. My dear friend Elena, she, as mentioned earlier, she was abducted by the Greys because of the MJ-12 agreements, and then had to repurpose the implant, and so she's been I have a list of on the webmatrix.net, 26 different corroborations that there's no way somebody would be able to make these things up.
Yeah.
And like, for example, here's three of them that was verified by NASA, who you can't trust, but it was a space agency. They just discovered that there's actually three planets on Proxima Centauri, exactly as Elena verified 2 years before.
Wow.
That Thorhan says, watch for net activity on Neptune to be revealed. And then 2 weeks later, NASA substantiated what's happened is these space arcs are because of the Intergalactic Confederation, otherwise known as the Cedars, has entered into our solar system back in 2021. And all the space arcs that are on our planet and on other planets in our solar system are activating. It's like a DNA activation, and it's causing the South Pole to heat up. And on our planet too, in Antarctica. And so there was this huge heat increase that happened that was all over the news. And then here's another one. Thorhan's working on Mars, at where his younger brother is now working, and they're doing terraforming operation. He tells Elena, "We just had a huge quake, as we're doing terraforming." And so what Elena does, in order to substantiate this, she immediately emails Dr. Michael Sell to let her know. And 1 week later, NASA reports the largest quake ever reported in our solar system on
Wow.
Mars. Stuff you just cannot make up. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Um, so Elena invited me on her show back in 2022. I shared with her my experience I had and working with crystals and things, and she said, well, Thorhan, her younger brother is working at the university in the Pleiades, learning how to terraform planets or be a star maker, and he has an advanced understanding of the science of crystals and the structure of the matrix and consciousness. And if you want, we could ask him some questions. So I was just beside myself of,
Yeah.
yeah. And so starting in April of 2022, um, I started composing the first questions, of which they're all on marcelvogel.org on a PDF document, which is hundreds of questions, hundreds of pages. So one of the first things, well, we were having a conversation, Jen Han and I, in our relaying way that we do. How it works is that I'll type up the questions. Jen Han can see through Elena's eyes because of her implant, the questions, and then he answers them, and she types them up and sends it back in an email to me. And so, in one conversation, he was saying, "No, you don't want another Atlantis now, do you?" And I said, oh, he says, "You know, you were there."
Mm.
And I said, "I don't remember life in Atlantis." He said, "You have the ability to see what my past life is?" And he says, "Yes, Dan, I do. We have technology that can read a person's consciousness field and view their past lives." And he says, "During the time of Atlantis, I was a scientist in one of the crystal generators in the capital city of Atla, which is the capital city of Atlantis, and that my field of expertise was medical holographic science, of all things." And he said, "That's all I can share right now." I was also found that from Elena that at the time of the destruction of Atlantis, there was teams of scientists that took the information and went to other parts on the planet and hid a lot of this information. Apparently, I was one that joined them. So I don't remember all this, but
Wow.
it's all quite fascinating. And so what I've learned from Jen Hen, by the way, this symbol on his chest is a symbol for a terra or a star maker or somebody who terraforms planets, you know.
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
he said that quartz crystals are basically interdimensional bridges. Are physically manifested on multiple densities and dimensions at the same time, and then the structure is such that it's so elaborate that it can embed consciousness, and it's the purest material in the universe. It's based on the same core fractal formula as water, and both are interdimensional bridges. Crystals can store data just as water does because it's constructed on the same fractal core formula. See, everything's based on this mathematics of this formula that
Mm.
I'm still learning about.
Huh.
And that tetrahedral fractal geometry is the secret of the universe. In other words, the entire universe is built up on this geometric tetrahedral structure that is related to this pattern called the flower of life. And this is something Marcel believed that when we think, our thoughts are geometric, complex, uh, geometric thoughts that can energy thought reshapes the holographic geometry, geometrical formula of reality. It rearranges the microconnections linking the fractal elements. Thought can reshape the holographic grid of reality because thoughts are complex geometrical patterns. The
Mm.
crystal will bridge the pattern to the existing one, and if the impulse is strong enough, the new pattern will force themselves onto the old, and the old will morph into the new. And so, normally, when we think, um, our thoughts have an effect on the holographic structure of reality that we're in, but our thoughts wither in time. This technology that he has shared with me has a way of embedding a thought that does not wither in time and it
Wow.
lasts forever.
Wow.
And I'll share how that works. Breath is something Marcel is very much aware of that basically it's a conduit for consciousness. You can direct consciousness with the breath pulse. He says it carries memories and thoughts, carries the energy of a being, but not only the encoding of the DNA, but as well as the encoding of the soul. When you project breath, you project by superimposing a parcel of the soul being, hence a fragment of one's consciousness. The energy force that is a living manifestation of source, which is the quartz crystal, is being impregnated inside the crystal. He says short, precise, powerful breaths are better than the long one. Long one, energy gets absorbed. So it's like an intention, like that, coupled with your thought. And Marcel as I mentioned earlier, he set this up and he found that yes, that's how it works. That the pulse breath has the greatest effect,
Wow.
and that love is the connecting pulse between all living beings in the universe, even through dimensional planes. It can bridge anything. He says, I mean anything. Love is a tool. So when you intend love into a crystal, you activate its transcending capacity. When on top of this, you embed a target by visualization, it bridges you to it easily because love is a secure channel because of the high frequency. It prevents dissonance. And
Wow.
that, the water, love, quartz crystals all interface because they're all built on the same core fractal formula. Um, and that, you can see in water that all the major crystallographic forms can be formed in water, as ice core samples in Antarctica revealed. Um, and the reason why only love can resonate into the higher densities is because, quote, John Hand says, dissonance cannot attune with an ordered state of geometrical resonance, because the matrix that we're in is in an ordered state of geometrical resonance. And this is illustrated visually with Dr. Masur Emoto's water crystallization
Yeah.
photos. When you have like thoughts that are kind of more aligned with love, like
Hmm.
wisdom, compassion, gratitude, all these thoughts, if you think, I want to kill you, or you're ugly, or blah 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 blah, whatever evil stuff, it doesn't take form because
Mm.
it's a dissonant pattern of energy, and so it does not align with the geometrical resonance that the matrix is in.
Wow.
And Frill, this is how they power their planet. It's the most powerful source you can ever imagine. Uh, that this is how they power their spacecraft. They have crystals in the central core, and impulse creates this waves which generate frill, which gets captured in the crystal, which uh, convert into this red ionized mercury that's spinning at a high speed in two perpendicular toroids that create the anti-gravity propulsion system that cancels the mass of the craft. They actually, you can see, it's like, here's the quarters. They actually have to teleport themselves into this because there's this whole thing's encased in these circulating toroids. One of our scientists in Paris, France, I'm working with, he basically laid out Einstein had it mostly all wrong. The
Wow.
vacuum is not empty. There's ether. Light speed is not constant. Tesla and Jen Hand both had it right on, different aspects of this. Not have to get into the technical. Um, I asked him a question. We have nuclear oil power and we run wires all over our planet to distribute power. I said, how do you have it set up on your planet, for distributing power? And he says, quote, on my home world, we have power generators, such as you know from Atla. I was trying to trigger my past life memory.
Hmm.
I wish I could converse with you directly from face to face. How exhilarating it will be. Someday we'll be doing that.
Mm.
He says, anyway, on Era, the planet he came from, we do have central power plants, pyramidal power plants with a tall natural crystal in the central core. The frill harvested is collected in the top of the pyramid and resonated, or you may understand the term better, teleported to smaller devices that we name secondary generators. These transpond the frill for and towards the power web of our cities. In the countryside settings, each house can choose to have a small replica of the big power generators, or we can either have a generator that supplies the whole community. That's how
Mm.
I have it organized where I'm coming from, the Udur and the Nardaryan Valley. We're relying on a community generator on the hill. It supplies power to all the habitats. So this is how it's all wireless.
Wow.
It's like in the big cities they have these big pyramids, and in the countryside settings you have a smaller pyramid, and if you live way out in the boonies like I do, you can have a small one that's only about this big. It'll
Wow.
give you all the power and it will fill your environment with frill, which is healthful and rejuvenating.
Mm,
Um, and their older sister, she's 160 years old,
mm.
um, Shea Redyon, the elder sister of Thorhan and Jenhan. She's a temple generator attendant and technician for one of the uh, pyramid generators. Um, Elena was shown one of these, what they look like, but it wasn't, this isn't technically accurate. It's actually, this is showing a 45-degree angle. It's actually a 90-degree angle. A gift from their world. He actually gave me the instructions on how to create one. And so I gathered together a team of scientists that we all worked together, and we made a little frill generator with a
Oh,
crystal, the silver toroidal field and the copper toroidal field. It's like these two torsion fields. They release the frill and the crystal, and the copper is wound clockwise for electromagnetic, and the silver counterclockwise for the etheric field. You can see the windings here. Then we electronically pulse them at a frequency of 4096 hertz, which is the resonant frequency of the quartz, 180 degrees out of phase, to create this dual torsion field that opens up the field. We made this little one, presented it to 1,000 people in Orlando, Florida in 2023 with my science team. And this is like technology hasn't been seen since Atlantis.
yeah.
And this is our first prototype. You can see the copper and the silver and the
Wow.
crystals in the inside. And so I'm always looking for practical, measurable, something that's useful for people of our planet from this, what I'm learning that people can use. And, I'm not have a zero financial interest. So we're going to give it open source and free to the world to replicate, which people
Wow.
can go to marcelvogel.org and but to hold off on the frill generator, here's a couple of applications. The frill generator is one, but we need to optimize it. The output is feeble right now, according to Una, who is they're 20,000 years more advanced than the Palladians, and
Mm,
they're very much aware of advanced technology. But the frill, it modifies, if you get exposed to the frill, it modifies matter by reorganizing the atomic bonds and what is dissonant. It has, in a simpler way, it's how it can heal. The frill has no effect on the atoms, properly speaking, but on the frequency between it. It regenerates your cells by invigorating and strengthening the bonds between it. With frill-charged water, you can drink and bathe in it. It the water heals, it extends youth. Plants and biological life forms naturally feed a frill that is present in the environment. Like when you do breath work and things like that, you're actually bringing frill into your body,
mm.
like Wim Hof, he does this. Increasing the frill supply has not only an energizing effect, it also heals. When there is a wound or disease, the frill level is weak. So you can imagine that, you could see, frill spas, where people can put themselves in water that's charged with the frill, or
Wow.
agriculture where you're impregnating the irrigation lines and the plants grow robust without
Wow.
pesticides or fertilizers because
Mm,
they're not sending out eat me signals to the bugs. Um,
wow.
because they're full of life force, and I'm sure it makes the quality of the food even better. So
Yeah.
it's something I'm working on, and I'm working on it this
Wow.
week to connect with Jen Hand to see what missing elements we need to increase the frill generation.
Incredible.
And this is the other amazing technology. This is the reality transflux modulator that it through a conscious interface with an activated open vortex eye of the crystal to be able to modify the holographic matrix and alter reality. This is incredible technology. This is something I'm working on. Um, anyway, there's you can
Mm.
you can do amazing things. You can imagine you can alter the structure of reality, all the things that you can do. You know, you can visualize a more healthy avatar of yourself, and it'll cause it to superimpose onto your avatar because the universe tends to perfection. You
Mm,
can envision a positive timeline that affects the planetary morphogenic field. And I'll go more into this later. Crystal healing work now with this new understanding is that Marcel originally pioneered. Now we're able to take it to a new level. We've learned that one of our engineers created this device that it has to be a very precise frequency. It's a little sound device. I don't know if you can hear that, but it will completely clear all the imprints out of a crystal. So it's important to do when
wow.
you're doing work with
Yeah.
crystals to clear them out. You can use it for water too. This is something we need to research. You can bring this crystal up to saturation and then cut it off and then bring it into your body. But this is something you need to know what you're doing, or else if you go beyond the saturation point, um, the crystal will implode and becomes light and transcends matter and density. So it's something you need to know what you're doing to do that. And this is the exercise I told you about, how your DNA can be transmuted into a stable state of auto regeneration once you unlock the blocks that keep the strands disconnected from the morphogenic field of the universe. So it regenerates you. And it's a simple exercise of breath and visualization and bringing into your heart vortex, feeding the upward toroidal flow. I do this for about, maybe 3 minutes or so. That's about all I can take. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really energizing.
Intense. Yeah.
It's like and visualizing the frill coming through. I use a little crystal, to help augment the projection of the frill. But all these details and in detail of how all this works is on marcelvogel.org. So, you don't have to go crazy trying to take notes.
Wow.
Um, Now, this goes into the depth of the science now. Una, who, as I mentioned, she's 20,000 years more advanced than the Palladians, which are 300 years more advanced than we are. So you can imagine just how advanced she is. She's an Altean member of she's an emissary for the Intergalactic Confederation that's here in our solar system right now. There's about 500 motherships that are massive and huge parked behind Jupiter right now.
Wow.
Una says, quartz is a transponder by nature. It connects to the points on the grid of space. It vibrates not only on the lattice of space, but also on the lattice of time. Your science will soon discover this. Quartz is the highest state of solid matter before the state of light. That is why quartz can heal tissue. She says, it doesn't organize matter on a molecular level, but it repairs it by transponding the injured organic tissue with the vibratory key of a previous state before the alteration was made. It reorganizes dissonance with a resonant template. Now, this is really fascinating because if you understand that when your avatar energy interacts with the crystal is vibrating across, it's connected to all densities, dimensions in space, but also going through time. So let's say you injured your arm and you have this resonant template of your arm before your injury is existing in the lattice of time. And so by transponding this vibratory key of this previous state before the injury happened, it reorganizes your current uh, body with a resonant template. Uh, it reorganizes the dissonance with a resonant template, rather, and causes it to heal. So this is technology that that she's basically saying, how we were talking about how the lattice of time exists and is tunable. Well, the quartz records everything through the lattice of time as well as space. Jen Han stressed the importance of is, there was a conversation going on with Elena Thorhan and Jen Han and myself. Um, uh, Jen Han was saying that Thorhan tells me you know what type of crystals correspond to what I say. And Elena says, the Vogel cut crystals? And Thorhan says, yes. And Dan asks, are the Vogel cut crystals significantly more powerful than a natural, like a natural, as they come out of nature, out of natural quartz points for doing this work? And Jen Han says, oh, yes, they are, if it
Oh,
is cut rightly, in perfect alignment with the grid of the lattice. That's the key.
wow.
Natural raw quartz are, of course, effective. As we know, cultures across the planet, the Indians and, use quartz crystals. Um, but the Vogel cut, as you name them, are a more surgical tool to operate in the fabric of space-time and universal consciousness. But not a Vogel cut crystal is more effective than a raw quartz crystal. But when you cut the crystal
Hmm.
like this so that you cut it in alignment with vertically the growth axis called the C-axis and laterally the hexagonal core, the six sides of the crystal. When you cut the crystal in that form and you try to get the terminations as close as you can to 60 degrees and 51.843, a lot of people call it 52 degrees. Um, then we designate this type of crystal as a quote Vogel Iridion cut in honor of Marcel's pioneering work
Hmm.
and the knowledge that Jen Iridion has shared with us. And so our my friends at Crystal Light and Sound, for about $180, you can get one about this size. And it opens up the vortex singularity just as much as the more expensive, larger one. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of money if you want to experiment with this technology.
Yeah.
Um, and marcelvogel.org is a link to them. I'm grateful for them because they honoring the information I'm getting and they're instructing their cutters to cut exactly in that way.
Mm. Wow.
Um, so why the 51.843 degree angle, which is the exact same angle as the Great Pyramid in
Hmm.
Egypt? The ratio acts as a transponder. It's dynamic geometry. Some shapes, because of the proportions, naturally affect the holographic structure of the matrix. We use these pyramidal ratio to build our frill generators because the geometrical structure of the central crystal in the generator will interface with the pyramidal ratio of the building or the machine harvesting its energy. The most accurate is 51.843. Um, and so it basically draws the ether in and transpons it. And why the 60-degree angle? Jen says it's because the center angle must be in resonance with the geometry of the holographic matrix of the receiver. And as I mentioned earlier, the fractal tetrahedral geometry, the flower of life, you see is all 60 degrees, a
Hmm.
tetrahedron, every angle is 60 degrees. So it's like form resonance. So it writes into this holographic tetrahedral fractal geometry of the matrix, and that's why the 60-degree angle. One's like the receptive end, the other one's like the active
Of
sending end,
course.
right?
Wow. Interesting.
It's interesting. Egyptian obelisks are all set at 60 degrees at the top.
Wow.
Um, Now we go into how this technology works and how the reality transflux modulator works. Um, uh, Somehow I signed up for this mission. Jen Han said, I was told the mission you have chosen consists in teaching the Terrans how they can change their reality. Somehow I always knew this. teach them how to activate the vortex and how to modify the holographic matrix. And so that's kind of what I've accepted as as a mission, I guess, to do because I've been honored to be given this information, and I think it can be used for benevolent purposes and help our civilization. Um, Again, I have no financial interest in this. I just want to bring um, beneficial information to help our world.
Oh, good for
Uh,
you. We appreciate it. I can tell you that.
oh, we need every tool we can get, you
Yes.
know?
Mm,
So, as I mentioned earlier, this was forbidden by the Prime Directive. There's certain things that are not supposed to tell us. And the question I asked was on the forbidden list. I asked about a dimensional portal between the charge triads. Thorhan had to get special authorization from the High Command of the Galactic Federation of Worlds in order for Jenhan to answer the question,
wow.
which he answered by saying it's the phase conjugation node for the vortex singularity of the crystal. He says, quote, it works by finding the phase conjunction node inside the crystal by projecting inwards the geometrical shapes of the two opposite points. Like a mirror, there is the vortex singularity of the crystal. Focus your thought and energy just there, and you may project your consciousness to anywhere you wish in this universe and the other universes, to other densities, other dimensions, anything is accessible in space, dimension, and time. This is great power, Elena. As Elena's relaying this. It
Hmm.
is very important information. I am honored to be allowed to share this with you. So, in the Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference in Colorado, I shared this with everybody, 1,000 people. I'm
Mm,
honored now to share this with all of you. And so this is how the science works. I started studying sacred geometry quite a bit after that experience in '77,
mm.
and I started to notice that these angles are related to certain geometries that are related to this pentagonal hexagonal geometries. And so I asked him about the relationship of the hexagonal pentagonal with these angles that are being cut on the crystal. And John Hand says, quote, the ratio of hexagonal pentagonal multi-layered blueprint applied to a living organism will produce cellular evolution humans, plants, stars, and so on. This ratio is the key to life and is also represented in the blueprint you know as the flower of life.
Mm.
Those who understand the secret geometry of the flower of life can create universes and life forms to populate them. And here, in this illustration I created, you can see the 51.843-degree angle
Oh, right.
and the 60-degree angle. You can
Mm.
see the hexagonal form and the pentagonal form, both of which is in our DNA in the
Wow.
double helix. And here you can see illustrated more. You can see the hexagonal. It's basically 60 degrees, which relates to the tetrahedron, which is the active side that writes into the matrix, and on the receptive that draws in the ethers is related to pentagonal, which is related to the golden mean. Like every angle to everything in a pentagon is golden mean ratio. You look in the Great Pyramid, it's all golden mean. So the golden mean ratio is kind of like, in a way, feminine, you could say. It's like nature. It's like the ethers are transponded by the receptive end and then written into the fabric of the tetrahedral lattice structure on this end. So that's kind of the relationship of the hexagonal pentagonal between these two geometries. And these two geometries create two different frequencies of vortex spin depending on the angles of inclination. The Denhan says that the two dynamics counter-rotate and meet at the vortex singularity. Because of this counter-rotating dynamics, the vortex is opened by phase conjugation of the two frequencies. I asked him, well, what happens if you had them both 60 degrees or if you had it both 52 degrees? what would happen. He says they come together and they completely cancel each other out. At the same frequency rate, the dynamics cancel. You need a difference in the speed rate to create a dynamic for the experience to tend toward perfection. But since nothing in the universe ever reaches the absolute point of perfection, the universe is alive through the dynamics of evolution.
Wow.
And so, this is how the reality transflux modulator operates. This is how they convert etheric energy into physical reality. The 51.843 degree angle transpons the etheric energy on this end, and the 60-degree angle geometry imprints it into the holographic matrix of the universe on this end. This is a great network. This is how we implement etheric energy into physical reality. Etheric on this end, and etheric physical reality on this end. And this is how the liminal geometric point of transfluxation, otherwise known as the vortex eye of the crystal, allows the intention of consciousness to imprint a geometric thought pattern. And so,
Wow.
with your consciousness, you interface with this transfluxation that's happening between these two vortexes that are opening up a singularity in the holographic matrix and is modulating it and causing it to modulate it into physical reality. This is why we call it a reality transflux modulator, because reality is being modulated by the transfluxation point. Um, I was curious to see what the vortex looked like, and I shared this Quillian photograph showing a double coiled torsion field coming off of a pyramidion with a Tesla coil. John Hen said, quote, a pyramidion generates a Frill vortex. Frill is the etheric energy. The vortex you depict in this visual that I'm showing him is the etheric energy harvested by the pyramidion. The dynamic influx of this harvested energy, the mathematical ratio of the pyramidion, generates a double coiled torsion field. So that's what the double coiled torsion field looks like inside the crystal, that these two are going in opposite directions. And the phase conjugation node right here, the two dynamics, Jenhan says, twirling in opposite directions create a phase conjugated tension that creates a singularity in the hologram, a convergence of infinite power. And so this creates what's called the eye of the crystal. Elena's talented sister, Steph Zach, helped me try to create an animation to try to show somewhat what this looks like coming together, these two torsion fields to create the eye. But nothing happens until you piezoelectrically stimulate the crystal to open the vortex. And you do this by either physical pressure or electronic pulses. Um, so it creates, when you piezoelectrically stimulate it, it creates a dynamic reaction between the two polarities of the charge triads of the lattice structure, creates an exponential reaction that triggers the singularity portal. In other words, the crystal is physically manifested in multiple dimensions and densities at the same time. And so when you activate it, it's activated across the spectrum. And so it creates this exponential reaction. And so, here you can see, normal physics, when there's either giving physical pressure or electronic pulse, it causes these charge centers to offset. And where this is where these two angles of inclination, if you draw a line, where they meet is the area of the eye of the crystal, or the vortex singularity. So if you have a crystal, it's good to if you can have inclusions in the crystal, but you want to avoid this area here that
Huh.
creates the eye of the crystal. And what I've done is I've just created little a little piece of tape you can see there. Yeah, there you go. You can use some rulers and determine where this area is so you can put your fingers there. And it doesn't take a lot of pressure. It just, when your consciousness is projected, it comes out through your fingers. You know, you can see your fingertips, you can see the fingerprint, it has like a little swirl. It's where the energy comes in, and you can modulate this open vortex with your intentions by squeezing it. I mean, crystals don't give, they're pretty hard. It doesn't take a lot of pressure, to
Wow.
pulse your breath in sync with your intention and the squeeze so that what it does is it opens up the vortex just momentarily, every time you squeeze it. Um,
Interesting.
but if you want to keep the vortex open, this is what Elena and I did in the beginning. Where she used a candle holder, I used some plumbing parts and some silver coins, and we set up our function generators to send pulses at 20 hertz to
Oh,
send
wow.
these compression waves, and it keeps the vortex continuously open. There's a funny story about this. Elena had for fun she just turned her activated her vortex and was in the kitchen feeding her cats in Ireland. And my friend John Charles, who is in the secret space program and been on med beds and everything like that, he has an incredible, and he teleports without technology. He has an incredible ability to go into high gamma brainwaves, and he was doing some video editing on a Japanese video, and he's listening to some beautiful Japanese music, and he was thinking, oh, Elena would love to hear this music. And then all of a sudden, and he's in Canada, right? And she's in Ireland, and she has the vortex open. And all of a sudden, the cats perk up and go run into her room, and there's Japanese music playing out of the open vortex of her crystal. And she lives in a remote area of Ireland. There's no Japanese music or anybody driving by or anything like that. And I asked John Charles to send me a copy of the MP3 file, of the Japanese music to see if it matched up. And it matched up exactly,
Oh
what
my
you heard.
gosh,
So
Dan, that's incredible.
of course, I asked Jen Han, is this a way we can use it for telepathic enhancement?
Yeah.
And he says, well, it's not my department, but he he
Wow.
said, yeah, what happens when you open up the vortex, it connects to all points in time and space. So it opens up this, you can be connected to another point in another galaxy if you want, but with
Wow.
it was interesting experiment. Of course, we evolved the design a bit better. Now you can see I
Yes.
have it inside. You can see the two silver electrodes on the side of the crystal that are being pulsed to open up the vortex singularity. And when you're doing work with this type of, it's good to be in gamma brain waves, which is a higher state, which is sometimes expressed as a deep love for all beings.
Mm.
And love always has a factor with all this work that we're doing. And it's wonderful, because love kind of bridges us from the lower densities into the higher, and the beings that are in higher density, they're more resonant with love. And so when you use love, it allows it to transcend the densities from where we're into the higher densities. It's the higher densities that form and we'll go into that later. But
Wow.
let's see. And the pineal gland is where our soul interfaces with our avatar body. I asked Jenhan about it, and he said, quote, "The crystals in your pineal gland are calcium carbonate, which are organically produced by the tissues of the human body. These microcrystals generate an electromagnetic field at the center of which is an interdimensional vortex for consciousness. So this is how our consciousness interfaces and operates our body. So it is the this interdimensional vortex of our consciousness that interfaces with the open vortex that's being opened up inside the crystal.
Wow.
Um, and And this then leads into a discussion on the structure of the holographic matrix and how, um, and since we have time, I can leisurely go into this a little more in depth than I usually do. Normally I'm short for time, but the multiverse is made up of an infinite number of these dimensional spheres, and we're in one of them.
Mm,
And it's represented by the flower of life pattern, which is this perfect geometry, right? Uh, it's just a bunch of circles, right?
right?
And that in the particular dimensional sphere we're in has 12 densities. Now, different dimensional spheres can have different number of densities. Some can have three, some can have 25, it doesn't, it all different. But in our particular dimensional sphere that we're in, there's 12 densities, which the highest density at the 13th level, you could say, is source, which
Mm,
is the highest densities. But there is no separation from source from the highest to the lowest densities because all of it is emanations from source. So the way creation works is that the higher densities form the lower densities. The lower densities do not form into the higher densities. And so when you're able to uh, create at the level of source, it will form into the lower densities of the morphogenic field of the uh, dimension that we're in. Um,
wow.
and that what's interesting is that this perfect geometry of the flower of life isn't exactly how the dimensional spheres manifest. Elena was actually on board the Nibiru, which is Prince Ea or Inky's ship, and she was shown what source looks like. And it's like these wobbly bubbles of different sizes. It's not like this perfect geometry. And it's because all of these dimensional spheres are in what's called the void. And the void is outside of time and space. And so you have this non-linearity that
Mm,
manifests, and you can see this throughout nature, that, you have all this diversity of manifestations of you have approximations of the golden mean ratio, in nature and things, but nothing ever is rarely is ever exactly. It's all like these variations.
hmm,
So um, these uh, dimensional spheres, they all exist in what's called the void. And the void being outside of time and space. How how this works when you're working with, like, say, the reality transflux modulator is when the singularity of the vortex is open, it's piezoelectrically stimulated, either temporarily with fingers or continuously using electronic pulses. This singularity is quantum through the void, is quantum entangled directly to the level of source. And when this is open, this is how they power their planets. Is frill comes from it when this is opened.
wow.
And when the intentions of consciousness are imprinted at uh, at this level with the open vortex going through the void, because there is no time in the void, the imprints at the level of source, which is the highest density, which forms all the lower densities, and it writes into the morphogenic field of the dimensional sphere that we're in to come into physical manifestation. But it writes it in. Normally, our thoughts wither in time, but when you write it at this level, it writes it forever. And so, because there is no time in the void.
Mm,
And so, this is how, you have to think about, like a master in the Far East has clear, coherent thought to be able to manifest an apple in his hand.
hmm
And from the ethers, the apple comes into formation. Kind of how the food replicators work, but more with using technology. But the fact that reality can come into manifestation when it's perpetual like that. It'll keep writing into the morphogenic field. It doesn't wither in time. It keeps on happening, and so it brings it into physical reality. And one of the things I'm asking Jen, and I'm wanting to set up an experiment to bring some physical reality into manifestation
Yeah.
using this technology. Back in the 1950s, George Delaware, who invented the holographic camera that I worked on, he did an experiment one time of tuning into the substance of lead. And he had the oscillators going and had the radionic dials tuned to it, into the target of lead. And after several hours, the the lead mass was measured before and after, and it gained slightly in mass because it was drawing from the ethers the vibration into physical manifestation. And so with the reality transflux modulator, I believe some type of experiment. Now, the thing is with the prime directive is I have to ask so many questions in order to get an answer. And you have to ask the right questions.
Mm.
They won't just tell you. You have to kind of figure it out on your own.
Huh.
And so I'm just barraging him with questions, and every so often I hit a nerve, with the right question that can give me an understanding of which way to go with my science team
Wow.
to make this technology quantifiable and measurable. Because, a lot of people think, oh, it's just pulling it out of where.
Right.
But, but if I can quantify it with
Yeah.
some high-level scientists that I work with, um, and make it quantifiable and measurable,
Yeah.
then it's a whole new ball game.
Yep. Yep. Wow.
Uh,
Incredible.
let's see, the last little bit is, there's all our minds are connected to the ionospheric shell of this planet. And I did a show with Elena. We decided to put some of this knowledge into action. So we had 1,700 people live that we did a positive visualization, of the deep state taken out of power and a new beautiful world created and everything. And a lot of people didn't have crystals, or they had little tiny crystals, or they had a glass of water. Water works too, and some people didn't have anything at all. And everybody at the same time, like that, pulse the breath with the visualization. And at that exact moment, a pulse happened on the Schumann resonance. And I asked Jen Han,
Wow.
did did what we did does this have anything related to what we did? And Jen Han said, yeah, of course it had an effect. There's a
Mm.
ratio of the population that needs to be gathered to produce a visible disturbance, and you did it that day. The brain waves emitted by all living creatures on this planet are in interresonance with the ionosphere shell. So I know this for a fact because in the 1980s, I introduced Dr. Robert Beck to Dr. Marcel Vogel, who was a pioneer in brainwave entrainment. And that he had some, it's funny, he gave me this big book by the CIA. They were really interested in this. And my house got broken into. It was the only thing that was stolen. But he traveled
Interesting.
around the planet and measured these people when they were in a working state of consciousness, measuring the left and right hemispheres. He says it's like almost two different people you have inside of you, and that there are two different patterns. But when they were in a working state of consciousness, the amplitudes synced together in perfect phase with each other and
Wow.
increased in amplitude. And the frequency that it resonated with was the Schumann resonance of
Mm.
which is about 7.83 hertz. And I did multiple experiments with this. I did actually lectures in front of people and had a little box. And I was working with the Naval Electronic Engineering Center, and we have a funny story that there were frequencies that you could do that would cause disassociation of the left and right hemispheres. It caused spatial disorientation. And so, of course, the CIA and they were interested in, any kind of weaponization of this
Of
type of
course.
technology. And so I was working with a Navy captain. We were working on some satellite equipment for the Navy. And he was wrapping up the equipment that we just finished. It's something he does in his sleep. He can do, no problem, right? He just does it every day. And I was, of course, using the Navy's electronics equipment, building little devices and things. And I had made one of these devices that was, I had the frequency counter on period measurement, and it was showing the milliseconds rather than the hertz. And so I didn't recognize that it was a perfect double-blind experiment. I accidentally left it on the frequency, which I won't say, caused the left and right hemispheres to desynchronize. And I had no idea. He had no
Wow.
idea. He's
Wow.
trying to wrap this thing, and he's going like, you know, um, and he says, "What the hell's going on here?" You know? And I looked up at the frequency counter and I shifted over to frequency measurement and said, "Oh my God, I accidentally left it on that frequency."
Whoops.
So it was a perfect double-blind experiment.
Wow.
Just to share that with
Wow.
that definitely our minds are in interresonance with this
Yeah.
ionosphere shell, like Jen Han says.
Wow.
So in Colorado, I had 1,000 people all visualize a positive timeline. I opened the vortex on the reality transflux modulator on stage and had everybody at the same time visualize that and pulse the breath into the open vortex. Um, and I showed them, basically prepare it in your mind, sense it with your mind's eye, and take a deep breath, and everybody pulsed it at the same time, visual reality,
Wow.
and so we that's Jen Han. So anyway,
Unbelievable.
that's the science of crystals that I've learned so far, but there's more to come.
This is incredible. My face hurts from smiling so much through this. I've never heard this before this last week. It was probably a couple days ago, right before I heard you speak with Jade. The 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 witness to the craft said that the center of it had a crystal sitting in the
Oh,
craft, and now that all makes so much sense
yeah, the
now that I've
crystals are
heard
in
you
the
talk.
central core. Uh-huh.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
incredible. You hear one thing and then,
Well,
like
that's just it. It's
it
the
all ends up adding up.
corroborations to pay
Yes.
attention to,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's why I've been keeping track. Like I said, there's like 26 corroborations of things Elena said that later is confirmed by other people. And you start getting so many corroborations,
Yeah.
you start to see that, hey, maybe there's something to this.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, you can't make this stuff up. You really
Right,
can't.
yeah,
You
earthquake
really
on
can't.
Mars, right.
Yes. Yes.
Unless you got your own private seismometer on Mars.
Right. I feel like you've covered so much, but is there anything you want to close off with?
Oh, just, everybody do your own research, and don't take anybody's word. Uh, find out what resonates with you and you know what research what corroborates and because there's a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of attempts to muddy the waters of reality
Mhm.
out there to control our perceptions. And so after a while, the thing about the truth is it has this ability to resonate, which a lie just doesn't have that ability. And a lie eventually gets exposed, and the truth continually validates and, gets revealed. So, keep a positive vision of the future as we're all co-creative in this collective reality. And I'm just really excited. It's like a dream come true. When I was a kid in the 50s, I always loved science fiction movies and
Yes.
The Day the Earth Stood Still and all this. And how incredible to be able to
Now we're living
interact
it.
with advanced beings that are thousands of years ahead of us, and
Yes.
it's, what used to be science fiction is now the new normal.
You're just, it's so clear your intentions are, you're in it for the right reasons, and you're only trying to help people. And I mean, there's nothing better than that if you ask me. I
Oh,
really, my hat goes off to you truly a million times
yeah.
over.
Oh,
You
we
and
have to
yourself.
liberate our planet, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
There's definitely what they call deep state or dark energies that
Yes.
have attempted to hijack. Absolutely, as we went through history, they definitely hijacked our
Yeah.
planet.
Mm.
But all that's transforming, and all that's changing,
Yeah.
and the future looks beautiful.
Yes, it
Yeah,
does.
there's a few turbulences along the way, but
Yeah.
it'll be beautiful in the end.
Yes, right. That's right. Well, seriously, on behalf of all of us, I thank you, Dan, and I thank everyone else that's doing what you're doing. It really is, it's so important. And yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing more important if you ask me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an absolute delight to join you, Ali,
Thank
because
you.
it's like I can see that your mind is one that is very excited about the future
Yes.
and about understanding more
Yeah.
of what's been hidden.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't stop. I really can't. I
Mhm.
mean, this is so, it's just so funny because I resisted it for so long because you're told one thing and you
Oh, it's
start to
so
think you're
polished, isn't it?
crazy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And now that I finally have just like I mean, there really is just no, I couldn't stop this if I wanted to, you know? It's in me. It's in, and yeah, I find it fascinating and beautiful. And yeah, it's incredible. It really is. I couldn't be more grateful to be alive. Like, truly.
Well,
I mean that.
as this truth gets revealed, it's going to unify. As you know, there's this division that's going
Yes.
on, and it's artificially created.
Yes.
And that when people realize we're not each other's enemy,
Right.
that we've had, hiding behind the scenes, manipulating our perceptions all this time,
Yeah.
um, that's like the biggest psychological challenge is to bridge this division that's been created because it's, the billions of dollars go in a think tank that weaponize the people's minds. And so that you can't tell people about this stuff.
Yeah.
They have to see it for their own eyes.
Yeah.
And so I think more and more the truth is going to be, as the truth comes out, there's going to be a lot of shock
Yes.
and there's going to be a lot of healing
Mm.
and, because families have been
Yeah.
torn apart over, the difference of
100%.
perception of
Yes.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And this all needs to be healed
Yes.
and brought together and unified.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah. Dan, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Really.
my pleasure, Ali.